My name is James Tash. This is assignment number 1, March 11, 2018. Human Sexuality Class CHFD220 with Professor Bruno. The 7 events I chose to discuss are the condom, use of contraceptives, Roe versus Wade, HIV and AIDS, Playboy magazine, gay rights movement, and social media. The condom has been known as the wetsuit, the rubber, the jimmy, the French safe, and even the nightcap. The utilization of condoms for various purposes has led to its dynamic development into the conventional latex type that's widely used today. The first known documentation of the condom was in about 3000 BC, but the ancient Egyptians were the first civilizations to use a sheath. For protection during intercourse, evidence from about 1000 CE states they were made of linen, specifically to prevent tropical diseases like bilharzia, which is also known as snail fever, and is a disease caused by parasitic flatworms. The condoms used in ancient Rome were made of linen and animal intestine or bladder. It is said they used muscle tissue from dead combatants, but no hard evidence for this exists. In 1839, a major milestone was reached by Charles Goodyear, considerably changing the face of the condom with the advent of rubber vulcanization during the Industrial Revolution. But by 1860, condoms were produced on a large scale, and the major benefit being they could be reused and be afforded at a cheaper price. In the 1920s, latex was invented. Latex was the revelation that transformed condoms into what they are today. They now have a very high tensile strength and can be stretched up to 8 times before they fail. In more modern conditions, rubber latex condoms can be produced at a swift rate of 3,000 per hour and can be lubricated with spermicide or even flavored. The transformation of the condom from a piece of bladder to a small, simple latex kind with high flexibility is one that can be looked at from a medical, scientific, and social viewpoint. The progressive device has gained such popularity that it's estimated that 18 billion condoms were used in the year 2015 alone. Women and men have long tried many techniques to prevent pregnancy. Prior to present-day methods of birth control, women relied on withdrawal or abstinence, but these often failed. As mentioned in previous slides, around 1,500 spermicides were introduced, whereas used condoms were soaked in a chemical solution and dried before using. Moving past the condom, a major setback in contraceptives was in 1873 with the Comstock Act. This law prohibited advertisements, information, and distribution of birth control and allowed the Postal Service to confiscate birth control sold through the mail. Fast forwarding to 1960, the first oral contraceptive was approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. In 1965, the Supreme Court gave married couples the right to use birth control, ruling that it was protected in the Constitution as a right of privacy. However, millions of unmarried women in 26 states were still denied birth control. But this changed in 1972 when the Supreme Court legalized birth control for all citizens of this country, regardless of marital status. In 1974, the FDA suspended sale of the Dalcon Shield IUD due to infections and several documented deaths among users. IUDs were only approved by the FDA 6 years prior in 1968. Although other IUD designs were not implicated, most IUDs were slowly taken off the U.S. market due to escalating costs of lawsuits in subsequent years. From 1990 to 1999, various other methods were discovered, such as introduction of Norplant, the first contraceptive implant, Depo-Provera, an injectable method, FC1 Reality, a female condom, and a Plan B and a dedicated emergency contraceptive product. There have been some additional advances, but one of the most significant and controversial advances was in 2013. After extended regulatory and legal battles, one brand of emergency contraceptive pill, the Plan B one-step, became available without a prescription on drugstore shelves. Today, more research is needed on women-controlled methods that protect against STIs and birth control for men. Barriers to accessing reliable contraception still exist for women worldwide. Jane Roe was an unmarried and pregnant Texas resident in 1970. Then, Texas law made it a felony to abort a fetus unless on medical advice for the purpose of saving the life of the mother. Roe filed suit against Wade, the district attorney of Dallas County, disputing the statute on the grounds that it violated the guarantee of personal liberty and the right to privacy indirectly guaranteed in the First, Fourth, Fifth, Ninth, and 14th Amendments. At stake in this matter was the fundamental right of a woman to decide whether or not to terminate her pregnancy. The court divided the pregnancy period into 3 trimesters. The decision to terminate the pregnancy was solely at the discretion of the woman. After the first trimester, the state could regulate procedure. During the second trimester, the state could regulate, but not outlaw, abortions in the interest of the mother's health. After the second trimester, the fetus became viable, and the state could regulate or outlaw abortions in the interest of the potential life, except when necessary to preserve the life or health of the mother. The decision in Roe faced a great deal of controversy, and 46 states needed to change their abortion laws as a result of the holding. The court case made it to Hollywood in 1989 in a film starring Holly Hunter and Kathy Bates. Almost 30 years later, the Supreme Court revisited the issue of abortion in Casey v. Planned Parenthood in 1992. The Casey court kept 3 findings made in Roe. 1. Women have the right to abort pre-viability without undue interference from the state. 2. The state may restrict abortion post-viability. And 3. The state has a legitimate interest in protecting women's health and life of the fetus. Unable to get the Supreme Court to overturn Roe, abortion foes have whittled away at abortion rights state by state. The ballooning restrictions have made it difficult to obtain abortions in many states and almost impossible in others. Many Americans favor a middle ground that ought to be reflected in state laws. After 45 years of bitter feuding, assuring that abortions are safe and increasingly rare should be the goal. On June 5, 1981, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention published a morbidity and mortality weekly report describing cases of a rare lung infection in 5 young, previously healthy gay men in Los Angeles. All the men have other unusual infections as well, indicating that their immune system is not working. 2 have already died by the time the report is published. This edition of the report marks the first official reporting of what will become known as the AIDS epidemic. Some say the Reagan administration dragging its feet dealing with the crisis due to homophobia allowed the disease to infect hundreds of thousands more. Here are 10 facts about HIV and AIDS. Number 1, anyone can get HIV. When HIV and AIDS first appeared, it was called a gay disease. That title has since been abandoned because it's now recognized that anyone can be infected with HIV. Number 2, the death toll from AIDS is astronomical. Since the HIV/AIDS epidemic began in 1981, more than 70 million people worldwide have been infected with the virus, and approximately 35 million have died. Number 3, you can have HIV and not know it. When some people are first infected with HIV, they can experience flu-like symptoms such as fatigue, fever, headache, sore throat, and muscle and joint pain within the first 2 to 4 weeks. But many other people won't even experience any symptoms at all. Number 4, HIV prevention is key. Because HIV is transmitted by the exchange of bodily fluids, the best way to prevent the infection is to always practice safe sex and avoid using drug paraphernalia like needles. The CDC recommends that everyone between the ages of 13 and 64 get tested at least once for HIV, and as often. Number 6, you can't get HIV from just any kind of contact. Myths still abound about HIV and AIDS. For example, you can't get HIV from insect bites or stings, hugging, shaking hands, or sharing toilets or dishes. HIV is transmitted by contact between broken skin, wounds, or mucous membranes. Playboy was born in 1953 in a Chicago apartment when Hugh Hefner set about starting his own magazine after being denied a $5 raise as an Esquire copywriter. He raised $8,000, including $1,000 from his mother, to produce Playboy's first issue. The main hook, nude photos of Marilyn Monroe. It sold 54,000 copies, and the magazine was an instant hit. Despite helping spearhead the 60s sexual revolution, Playboy felt the heat from newer, racier publications like Penthouse and then later Hustler. Hefner briefly toyed with more explicit pictorials, but chose to stick to a more tasteful approach. Heading into the 70s, an estimated 1/4 of college men bought Playboy. The company went public in 1971, and the magazine circulation peaked in 1972 at more than 7 million sold. In October 1971, Doreen Stern is the first African-American Playmate cover star. Though not the first in the magazine, she became the first African-American Playmate to feature on its cover. Playboy has rarely shied away from controversy. When Playboy clubs in the segregated South started turning away black key-holding members, Hefner bought back the franchises and opened them up to all members regardless of race. In January 1972, Playboy's first centerfold was with full frontal nudity. When Penthouse first came to the U.S., ready to challenge Playboy on its own patch, it was already showing pubic hair. As the competition, dubbed the Pubic Wars by Hefner, heated up, Playboy slowly showed more and more of their models until January 1972, when Marilyn Cole went full frontal in the issue's centerfold. In November 1980, Playboy courts controversy again with the Women of the U.S. Government photo shoot. Playboy's Women of the U.S. Government issue featured pictures of government workers semi-nude. 2 Navy employees were court-martialed and honorably discharged for appearing in its pages. In 2014, Playboy celebrated its 60th anniversary, and in October of 2015, Playboy announced the magazine would no longer feature nudity. Playboy magazine stopped featuring pictures of naked women in an attempt to embrace a modern, hipper image. The magazine's sales have steadily fallen since its heyday, and the company reported a spike in online traffic after making the website nudity-free late last year. The magazine will still feature photo shoots of women in provocative poses, but they won't be nude. Playboy aims to market itself at a modern, young, city-dwelling men and hopes this change will help. The gay rights movement, also called homosexual rights movement or gay liberation movement, civil rights movement that advocates equal rights for gay men, lesbians, bisexuals, and transsexuals. It seeks to eliminate sodomy laws barring homosexual acts between consenting adults and calls for an end to discrimination against gay men. 1974 brings 2 victories on the political side when Kathy Kozachenko becomes the first openly LGBT American elected to any public office when she wins a seat on the Ann Arbor, Michigan City Council. And Elaine Noble is the first openly gay candidate elected to state office when she is elected to the Massachusetts State. October 14, 1979, the first national march on Washington for lesbian and gay rights takes place. It draws an estimated 75,000 to 125,000 individuals marching for LGBT rights. March 2, 1982, Wisconsin becomes the first state to outlaw discrimination based on sexual orientation. May of 2004, the first legal same-sex marriage in the United States takes place in Massachusetts. In 2008, voters approved Proposition 8 in California, which makes same-sex marriage illegal, but 2 years later it's found unconstitutional by a federal judge. In 2012, the Democratic Party becomes the first major U.S. political party in history to publicly support same-sex marriage on a national platform at the Democratic National Convention. In 2016, a record number of out athletes compete. As of June 27, 2017, the District of Columbia residents can now choose a gender-neutral option of their driver's license. D.C. residents become the first people in the United States to be able to choose X as their gender marker instead of male or female on their driver's license and identification cards. And lastly, we live in a culture that is becoming increasingly dependent on social media networks for our daily personal interactions. Browse Twitter and you'll hear about your buddy's cup of coffee in the morning or a recent milestone in someone's life. Check your Facebook wall and you'll find information about the news your friends enjoy reading while browsing pictures of their kid. Finding sex on your cell phone is as easy as picking your favorite app, build a profile, and voila, you're on your way. From Grindr and Tinder to Down and Pure, new apps to satisfy our most basic human desires are popping up all the time. Next, we'll discuss a few of the numerous apps available. I would argue that the Down app, Bang with Friends, is the social media app that really ignited the desire for more sexual encounter products. Launched in mid-2013, this sexy app allowed users to choose friends on Facebook who they'd like to have sex with. Grindr is another product of our sex-obsessed, social media-driven culture. The app is widely known as a place. Forget beating around the bush. Pure is an app that wants people to meet up for sex. The app has settings for boys and girls and boys, and allows users to stay anonymous until they find a match. Users can request more photos, and all trace of their information is deleted in an hour after it's shown. It makes me think of a Snapchat meets Tinder. Although research is aimed at This concludes my presentation of the 7 significant events influencing sexuality. Thank you for watching.